This episode of Ergo goes to the resistance.
I'm pulling my way. Go. Got me anxious, got me broke, but I can't live this on my own.
Peter, I live with lupus, and I'm fighting for my life. I need your help in fighting for the ACA. Please share your healthcare stories in the replies, and let's fight this together.
Welcome back to Ergo, everybody. I'm your host, Brandon, here in Ohio. As always, happy and excited to be here to talk politics with you on Sunday. The video you just saw was a former guest of this show, Peter Morley, and he is in New York, giving press conferences and doing everything that he can possibly to help the resistance fight the disastrous, murderous Senate Republican healthcare bill or effort to repeal and replace Obamacare. We'll speak to that later on in this episode. To start off, I'd like to give just a few housekeeping and updates to the show. As you will see over the next few weeks, I will be adding additional segments that will run separately from the main show as a way to expand the show, as well as changing the logo and my rebranding effort, changing the introduction to the show, changing the backdrop. It's just all been a complete workaround as I'm preparing to get ready to start grad school. I like to have all this stuff in place and ready to go so that I can keep the show going while I'm in school. At any rate, let's jump right into the news because that's what we do here. This logo represents the Election Assistance Commission, or EAC for short. And what it is it is the only federal agency that is established that secures our voting process. It sets standards, it sets management regulations for the voting process and for voting machines and voting systems to prevent our votes from being hacked from outside or inside forces. This second logo represents the Federal Election Commission, or FEC for short. And what the FEC does is it is the federal agency that governs all campaigns and how they're financed. And it regulates who can contribute to a campaign, how much can you donate to a campaign, and so on and so forth. It would be the agency that should be the one that is investigating Donald Trump and Russia and their collusion efforts, but we're not even going to talk on that here. We're going to stick to the current news. At any rate, in the House of Representatives, the House Republicans are working to defund and remove the Election Assistance Commission. And their argument for doing so is the following. Quote, House Republicans say the EAC, or Election Assistance Commission, no longer is necessary and that the Federal Election Commission, or FEC, could bear its responsibilities. They also say the agency's work duplicates efforts at the Department of Homeland Security and FBI, and that it improperly interferes in the right of states to conduct their elections. End quote. Now, if you will remember my point that I just made a few seconds ago, the Election Assistance Commission is the only federal agency that protects and maintains the voting system for all 50 states. The states don't have individual election assistance commissions that work to protect the voting machines. So, if you take this news and couple it with Donald Trump's newly established Voter Integrity Commission, we now arrive at what I like to characterize as the latest corrupt Republican move, or the latest Republican scandal, to say the very least. Now, Donald Trump, over the past few months, has claimed that he really won the popular vote in the 2016 election, when in fact, he lost the popular vote by 2 to 3 million votes, somewhere in between that. Now his argument is there were 2 to 3 million cases of voter fraud and illegal votes, so now he created this Voter Integrity Commission to find out who and where those 2 to 3 million votes came from. Despite several reports, several articles stating that there is virtually no voter fraud within this country, except for him in Russia hacking voting systems and all that stuff. At any rate, Donald Trump presses forward with this Voter Integrity Commission, and it has recently just made national news. It made national news first and foremost for the fact that it just recently this week held its first hearing, despite its widespread detesting from all the states and all the people. Secondly, it made national news for the fact that the vice chair, this gentleman named Chris Kobach, is the vice chair of the commission, and he sent out this very intriguing letter to all 50 states. And a segment of the letter that we're going to highlight here states, quote, "If publicly available, under the laws of your state, please send the full first and last names of all registrants or registered voters, middle names, their initials if available, addresses, dates of birth, political party if recorded in your state, last 4 digits of social security number if available, voter history, elections voted in from 2006 onward, active and inactive status, canceled status, information regarding any felony convictions, information regarding voter registration in another state, information regarding military status, and overseas citizen information," end quote. So truly, you heard that correctly. Donald Trump, this clown Chris Kobach, and this fraudulent Voter Integrity Commission is working to get the states to send them all registered voter, basically private personal information. Thankfully, about 20 states or more have outright said that they're absolutely not going to send that information, and I feel bad for the other 30 states that are possibly playing a part in all of this madness. At any rate, this Voter Integrity Commission wants to get all of the voter information in one place, and they want to store it on the Vice President Mike Pence's laptop, which will be secured and monitored by one of his staffers. So, how does this affect you? Why do I call it the latest Republican corrupt move or the latest Republican scandal? Well, first and foremost, we must consider why each state holds their own voter information. And each state does that so that there is not one national database for someone like Russia or someone like China to come in and have all of the voter information in one place so that they can corrupt and hack it. Smart idea, right? Also, if you consider the fact that Republicans for many years have done many things to corrupt the votes to stay in power. Consider how they have moved many of the voting locations off of college campuses so that college-educated voters can't vote. Consider gerrymandering, where they draw all of the districts so that the black votes, the Latino votes, the women votes, the college-educated votes don't have as much presence, so that way people can keep voting for Republicans to be in power. Or consider the voter ID laws that Republicans put in place to prevent, again, black voters, Latino voters, women voters, college-educated voters from participating in elections. Also consider this. Wouldn't it be very convenient for Donald Trump, Mike Pence, and this fraudulent Voter Integrity Commission to have all of our voting information in one system so that they can purge and remove all Democrat or all, more specifically, Hillary Clinton voters from all of the voter registration rolls across the country? Think about how convenient it would be for them to not have any of us who vote for Democrats or vote for the left or vote for Hillary Clinton. Think of it however you want to think of it. Wouldn't it be very convenient for them to remove all of that, making it near impossible, if not to say very difficult for us to participate in the next election, so that way only the Republican voters can come out and vote? Which is why I think they specifically want to know our voting history since 2006 onward. Watch this space, because with Donald Trump, there are always several shoes to drop. I like shoes, but I don't like him or Ivanka's shoes. Ergo wants to be the platform for you to express your political thoughts. Please feel free to join the discussion via phone, video, or in person. To set up an interview, contact the Ergo Show at outlook.com. So we're interviewing Alan Marston, who is a candidate for City Council in Olathe. So, Alan, why don't we begin with an introduction of yourself and why you're running for City Council?
Sure. I'm a 49-year-old married guy, just a standard guy. Got 2 kids, one 21, one 16. I'm a former police officer. I'm a veteran. And I've been a retail security and safety professional for 25 years.
Wow.
The reason I started running was primarily because there's a lack of accountability in government. We've seen it at all levels. It's actually trickled down to our level here as well. There are some members of our city council that simply don't return emails, don't return phone calls. And when they do, they get rude with the people. If someone gets the courage to stand in front of city council to oppose a development or an ordinance, there are times where they are belittled. And that's something that I can't tolerate as a person, and I don't think the community should tolerate it from their elected officials. So that's one of the reasons that got me started. There are so many different reasons.
That's awesome. So by your city and your state being predominantly a red state, a deep red state,
Yes.
How would you identify yourself in the political spectrum? You know, progressive, liberal, moderate, conservative, a bag of all tricks?
Well, if you keep it with the color theme, I'm pretty much tie-dye.
Mm-hmm.
I go all over the board, man. With my background being the way it is, obviously I'm going to have some conservative values in me. You know, strong on public safety, strong on the military. Luckily, City Council doesn't have a military, otherwise that could be rather fun. I tend to be fiscally moderate. I don't want to raise taxes because I kind of like to keep money in my own pocket. But I also refuse to consider removing services that take care of the people. So that's why I categorize myself as a moderate. I'm not fiscally conservative, but you know, I want to take care of the people. That's my main thing. But when it comes to social issues, civil rights issues, things dealing with the people themselves, I'm about as far left as you can go, probably. And that shows in some of my endorsements. Last week I got endorsed by Equality Kansas, which stands to protect the rights of the LGBTQ community. And I'm very proud of that endorsement.
Awesome. And so speaking of which, because you know I did my research on you prior to the interview, I familiarized myself with your campaign. The audience, of course, doesn't know. So you have a very forthcoming website with all of your information out there, which is, you know, phenomenal. So people can actually kind of get to know you before they meet you or anything else. So could you identify some key issues in Olathe and what your plans are or for proposals or whatnot to fix some of the issues that you guys might have?
Right. Well, like I said a few minutes ago, public safety is my biggest passion in life. It started early on when I joined the military. Then I was a police officer. So public service has always been a part of my core belief system, and this is the next phase of that. So with that, I want to make sure that our city is as protected as humanly possible. We have one of the best fire departments in the world. If you check all the rankings and everything, benchmark-wise, the insurance standard, it's all Class A, #1 across the board. We are literally one of the top 265 fire departments in the world, according to those measures. However, our city has very much exploded over the past 20 years in population, in economic growth, and that's great as long as the infrastructure keeps up with that growth. Mm-hmm. So with the direction that the city is growing to the south and to the west, we have not expanded our services into that area. So we are looking at an area that is essentially underprotected as far as fire services go. So I met with the fire chief, brilliant guy, I love the guy, and I pointed on the map to one of the newer developed areas, and I said, so if I go over here, I'm kind of getting up there, you can see in the beard, it's gray. If I go over there and I have a heart attack, what's going to happen? He said, you're going to die because we cannot get there fast enough. So two things came to mind right there. Number one, don't go to that part of town for a little while. And number two, we've got to get another fire station built to protect the families that live there, the school kids, the schools themselves, the millions of dollars in businesses out there. It's ridiculous that they're not covered. And then we've got one of the top police departments in the country, again, according to all the benchmark studies. And they are achieving these measures with 30 fewer officers than the average staffing model for our size city. What that does is that puts an undue burden on the officers that are there to carry this tremendous load. And the strain, the stress, and everything that naturally goes along with police work, you're amplifying that by not having enough coverage. So I would like to get them staffed up.
Right.
And then there's the other issue is the transparency issue. I don't see how you can serve the people without actually talking with them. So to that end, what I'm proposing that we do is I'm going to have monthly town hall meetings or coffee events or pizza parties or something where everybody can come in. I can explain to them what's going on in the city, how it's going to impact our ward and their lives, whether it be financial or it's an inconvenience traffic-wise for a little while. I'm also going to have a ward-specific website, possibly. Definitely going to have a Facebook page. And you've probably seen I'm pretty active on Twitter as well. So all of these things just help to connect the people to the government. And it's a basic process that people have forgotten about, and we need to bring that back into the forefront.
Awesome. Also, in your platform, you spoke to diversity. Specifically, I want to commend you for your reach to the LGBT community as being one of your main targets to address diversity. I started this show, Ergo, to increase engagement of minorities and millennials. So how much of an impact do millennials and minorities have in your city, and how do you plan to engage them?
Well, right now, both groups, the millennials and the minorities, are a little out of the process as far as it goes right now. They're getting much more active, very much more engaged. And most of that you could probably trace back to November of last year.
Right.
Everybody's on fire about it, and that's globally. The way to get them engaged and involved is simply to approach them, interact with them. We've got a Young Democrats group here in Johnson County where we live. It started 6 months ago, and it has just really, really grown to a very good-sized organization. And they're very active. They're out canvassing for candidates. They're registering people to vote. All the things that you would expect a young political organization to do. And they're very supported by the party itself and by most of the candidates. We really enjoy having them out there helping us. So the more people we can get involved in that is going to help. There are also other political organizations that are very active as well. Reaching out to them is the key. If you don't engage them, it's not going to work. And then when you do engage them, when you sit down with them and find out what their issues and concerns are, don't say, okay, give me a couple weeks, I'll come up with the answer myself and give it to you.
Right.
Make them a part of that solution. Make them have their own input. because they know what they want, and a lot of times people my age don't.
Right.
Now, I used to be young. I try to think I'm young, but I'm not. And I'm not the one who's having to look at such a widespread job search that they are dealing with. So as a community, we need to make sure that we're addressing the job situations, housing, even things as basic as entertainment. We've got to have the right things in our city to keep the millennials here, keep the minorities here, make everybody feel welcomed, make them feel safe, and make them feel wanted.
Right.
They have to be a part of this community. Now, of course, I'm not talking handouts. They've got to work with us and make everything work for the entire city. There are key parts to citizenship that we may have to make sure that everybody takes part in. For example, voting. We've got to get that vote out. In my ward, 4 years ago, when this seat was available, 1,200 people voted. Now, you may not know much about Olathe, but I'll tell you this. We are a suburb of Kansas City.
Right.
We're on the Kansas side. And there, in my ward, the southeast corner of this city, has 19,000 registered voters. And only 1,200 voted in the last election.
Wow.
That's
is draconian almost.
very much.
So you are endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police, and you were, as you said, a police officer and in the military security as well. Nationally, as you know, tensions among communities and policemen are growing to be more tense, obviously. Do you have that same problem in Olathe? And if not, what would you say to the communities that do have these tensions?
Up to this point in Olathe, we have not had any situations like what you're discussing. I'll say this, though. Kansas City, it's a 15-20 minute drive for me to get to downtown Kansas City.
Okay.
Kansas City, Missouri has actually recently been mentioned by the FBI as one of the highest murder rates in the country right now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising. We had, I believe, our 70th homicide just last week. Mm-hmm. And that's not like us. We're that bedroom community. We're nice, quiet, peaceful. Mm-hmm. But we do traffic with KC quite a bit. So there is that intermingling of elements. Any of that tension, that's up in Kansas City. We don't have it here, luckily. Am I going to say it will never happen here? No. I'm not that stupid. The key to addressing all of this, and it's the same sort of mantra you're hearing on the national news, is education on everybody's part. Our police department, I mentioned, I think very highly of them. They do spend a lot of time in training on de-escalation of force, trying to make sure that that tension level doesn't get to the point where that trigger finger just goes. Making sure that the people are educated on the functions of the police department, the best way to handle situations when dealing with the police. It's not just on the police, it's also on us into how we respond to their issues, their commands, their traffic stops. So we have a Citizens Oversight Board. We have Civilian Police Academy.
Okay.
They are very active in our community. They do events constantly, Coffee with a Cop. They do donuts all the time because, donuts and cops, it works.
Right.
It's not just a fable, it's true, trust me. But they engage with the community. They work with the school kids. A very proactive school resource officer program helps a lot. It helps develop kids at an earlier age to know that cops aren't the bad guys all the time.
Right.
There are a couple of bad seeds. no question about it. But in Olathe, luckily, we've been very, very lucky to have a strong, positive image of police officers.
That is phenomenal, and I think that everybody could definitely learn from that. I mean, this is honestly the first I've ever heard of anybody having a citizens oversight board. I just think that that's I hate to call that progressive in such a deep red state, but I consider that to be very progressive. Or maybe just the bigger cities are just behind the ball on that. I'll say that. So that way I'm being fair to both sides.
Right. Though they are becoming much more common.
Okay.
It's the way most larger cities are starting to address the concerns of the people, because they need to have an input. They need to be relating directly with the police so that the police know where the fear is and how to fix that.
That is really good stuff. So we spoke to transparency and making sure that we hold the elected officials accountable. Mm-hmm. So in our national government and even in some local governments, the elected officials are becoming more so politicians, more concerned with political victories and special interests and all that jazz. Are there any other reforms that you think we might need for government overall, nationally, locally, either or?
Well, nationally, to speak to the transparency and accountability thing, one of the things about being in this deep red state that I'm in is we have officials that have made national news fairly recently. We have a representative for my district, in fact, Kevin Yoder. Mm-hmm. He is one of those that will not have a town hall meeting. Right. Instead, he has what he calls tele-town halls. It's basically a big conference call. Mm-hmm. And if you're not selected to be on that call, you're not getting on that call. And if you start to ask a question that's not approved or it starts to turn sideways for him, you get disconnected or muted.
Right. Wow.
So he's orchestrating his communications with the citizens, and it's not a good thing. The two senators we have, Pat Roberts, who has pretty much checked out, and then he doesn't talk to us.
Right.
He does. Jerry Moran, I'll give him credit. During this whole healthcare fiasco, he actually came back during the recesses, and he actually held town hall meetings, and he would stand there for an hour and a half, talk with the citizens, listen to their questions. Now, granted, being in Kansas, we tend to be a little bit more polite. We're not going to stand there and just chuck tomatoes at the guy. He will engage in the conversation. And it's a fairly respectful conversation. Every once in a while you'll hear a boo or a hiss or a cheer or whatever the case may be. But he listened to us. And when it started to come to the big push, he was one of the last two senators who said, no, they're not going to vote on the motion to proceed. So he helped kill that health care bill. Right. So we praised him. We gave him all the high fives and kudos in the world. And then 2 days later, he says he's in favor of the straight out repeal. So we turned the table again. So we're trying our best to hold him accountable. So yeah, that does trickle down into the local as well. But as far as a local reform I would like to see take place is our city has a policy, and has had for many years, to pay all employees of the city at the median level for our size city. Mm-hmm. I get it. As a businessman, I understand payroll is your single most controllable expense. But when you have departments, our Public Works Department achieved accreditation for the fourth straight time.
Right.
They have set the standard in many of the measurables as model ratings. Our police department and fire departments, I can't ever talk enough about these guys. I love them to death. But they're being paid at a median level with less equipment, fewer officers, and they're still achieving these measurables. In my opinion, for that, you need to be paid commensurate to your performance. You don't get those ratings and still maintain that median pay. You've got to escalate that pay a little bit. They've got to be rewarded. Otherwise, you're going to lose these performers. You're going to lose the trained people that we have. So you're going to have to start fresh. And then your measurables are going to drop. And you get it back up there, and then they realize, you know what? I can go 2 cities over, and I can receive double the pay.
Right.
Doesn't make sense to me. You get what you pay for.
Exactly.
So I want to retain those people. I want to make sure that those people are taken care of financially, benefit-wise, and equipment-wise, to make sure that they do the job they need to do for us. Mm-hmm. And then they go home to their families and enjoy a quality of life.
Right.
That's common sense.
Right. It's kind of like another metaphor, or I don't even know the proper soliloquy or whatever, or life lesson. One of my old bosses taught me was, give me the tools, I'll build you a house. So if you don't give me the proper tools, then I can't build you the correct house, or I'll build you a faulty one. So to speak.
And I'm not talking about, overdoing it and just gifting them this stuff. They earn it.
Right.
If they didn't earn it, I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't want to escalate the pay for them, but they earn it every single day. And they've asked for this. They've tried to reach out to the government officials and say, "Hey, we need this money, guys. We're putting up good numbers for you." Mm-hmm. And the response they're getting is, if we escalate your pay scale, then we need to escalate the pay scale for the accountant in accounts receivable, or the trash collector, or the maintenance worker in Parks and Rec. Mm-hmm. That's not even apples to apples, I'm sorry.
No, that's very much apples to oranges.
Yeah, you're talking apples to carrots. It's not even the same spectrum.
Exactly. Well, one is responsible for life-saving measures, and we could go all day on the debate of pay scales, because I'm actually one of those far left people who is not on board with the $15 minimum wage pay increase. So I identify with you as well on some conservative values. So all right, well, why don't you go ahead and provide the audience with some campaign information, election dates, and how we all can support you in your upcoming election and primary.
Sure. We have a primary on August the 1st. There are 4 candidates running. It's a nonpartisan election, which is good, because really the things that divide us as Democrats and Republicans are more of a state and federal level issue. That stuff doesn't happen at the city level. It's all about the services you provide. So there are 4 of us. The top 2 vote getters move on to the general election November the 7th, so we're making the final push right now. All my information is available online. Like you said, I'm pretty out there as far as letting everybody know what I'm about on my website, which is marstonforolathe.org. And it's the word for, not the number 4. It's FOR. So MarstonForolathe.org. I'm also the only candidate in this race that has 4 endorsements. As you mentioned, the Fraternal Order of Police. I mentioned Equality Kansas. I've also received the endorsement of Mainstream Coalition. And just the other day, I received the endorsement of the International Association of Firefighters. So firefighters and police can be brought together to unify behind something. And they've chosen me, luckily. We're still out there in the heat of all of this, except for today, knocking on doors and actually reaching to the people. I want to talk to everybody, find out what their concerns are and what they need from their government. It's kind of old school to do it that way, but I believe that's the truest way to campaign. A campaign is like a job interview. If you don't talk to the boss, how do you expect to get the job?
Exactly.
So I'm talking to the boss every day I get a chance to. It's very exciting. We're having a lot of fun. I think my wife is going to be in the corner hyperventilating on election night. I'll be pacing in circles, but I feel very good about our chances in this primary. So if anybody wants to hop on board and help, even from Ohio or Massachusetts or wherever, we can set you up to make phone calls. I've also got donation links on my website. No politician on the face of the earth is ever going to turn away money. So
Exactly.
I will always take a donation.
All right. Well, Alan, thank you so much for your time and being on the show. We'll check back in with you just to see the results of the primary, and then continuing to help you promote your campaign for whatnot. Because I anticipate you'll make the primaries, and hopefully we can help give you a little push to the actual election. Currently, the Senate breakdown is 52 Republicans, 46 Democrats, and 2 independents that vote with the Democrats. So, in order for anything to become law through Senate rules, there needs to be a total of 60 votes in order for anything to pass. However, through a process known as the reconciliation process, something can become a law through a simple majority vote, which means that there only needs to be 51 out of 100 senators to agree on something to make it in law. Or there can be 50 senators, and then they can use the vice president's vote to cast the tie-breaking vote of 50 versus 50. So with 52 Republicans, there only needs to be 3 Republicans willing to come out against their own party, against the Republicans, in order to kill something. So, when the Republican senator, the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, released his Better Care Reconciliation Act, it immediately lost 2 Republican senators that said that they will vote no on that bill. Those senators are Senator Susan Collins and Senator Rand Paul. So in essence, with those 2 Republican senators saying that they're going to vote no, the Republicans could not lose another vote, and instead they could have their 50 other senators that were going to probably go along with this disastrous, ridiculous healthcare bill, and then use Mike Pence, the vice president, to cast the 51st vote, giving them the votes that they needed to pass it into law. However, on Monday night, Republican Senators Jerry Moran and Mike Lee came out in a joint statement saying that the both of them would also be voting no on Mitch McConnell's Better Care Reconciliation Act. Thankfully, this provided 4 no votes, which if you remember I just said if there were 3, that'd be enough to kill it. So with 4, that totally demolished it. And I'd like to thank you, Jerry Moran and Mike Lee, for listening to your constituents in doing what is right here. It is important to note, before I move on into the next point, that this Better Care Reconciliation Act to repeal and replace Obamacare was written only by 13 male senators. Mitch McConnell, the Republican senator and the majority leader of the Senate, would not allow any women to participate in the process to draft this murderous healthcare law. So, in response to losing it, this is what he had to say at his press conference.
For all of us, it's pretty obvious that we don't have 50 members who can agree on a replacement. A lot of people have been involved in the discussions, been very passionate discussions, but everybody's given it their best shot. And as of today, we just simply do not have 50 senators who can agree on what ought to replace the existing law.
break down what Mitch McConnell just said here, I'm going to be using a tweet. How ironic. And this tweet comes from Adam Parkomenko, who is a former Hillary Clinton aide. And his tweet states the following. McConnell translation. We simply do not have 50 senators that can agree on what ought to replace millions of people's lives. End quote. So, now that Mitch McConnell lost the vote to have the Better Care Reconciliation Act become a law, he is now proposing that they simply just repeal Obamacare altogether with a 2-year delay, and over those 2 years, they will come up with this grand replacement plan that Donald Trump will say will be far better than Obamacare, and that they will come up with this plan over 2 years and then replace Obamacare. Now remember, I just said the first bill, written by Mitch McConnell was also written by 13 men, Republican senators. So when he came up with the idea to only repeal Obamacare with no replacement for 2 years, 3 women, Republican senators, saved the day for all of us, the American people. Those 3 women senators are Shelley Moore Capito, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins. Beyonce said it best when she said, quote, all of this winning, I've been losing my mind, end quote, in her latest song called Shining. The resistance gets credit for this victory. As you said before, Donald Trump, this is what winning looks like. And to quote you again, as seen here,
we're going to win so much that you're going to sick and tired. You're going to say, please, please, Mr. President, we're sick and tired of winning. Please let us have at least one loss. It's no longer exciting to win. And I'm going to say,
you're damn right. I'm very sick and tired of all of this winning against you. Until next week, this has been Ergo, before you, the people.
I'm pulling my weight.